Well, hello folks. Welcome to Food Time and Garden. I'm Laura, and I am so happy to see you here this day. I am having a massive food preparation in my kitchen. I'll be making refried beans inside of my Instant Pot. Oh, it's so quick and easy. I'll be making a somewhat sausage, chorizo sausage, out of about 1/4 pound of ground pork for steam buns later in the week. I will explain all of the ingredients, and I'll also have the recipes for each one written in the description box below this video for your convenience, because it's easier than starting and stopping a video and having to write it down. I harvested some perennial oregano yesterday, and I have it drying on one of my collector plates inside of my kitchen. Now there's about 1/2 pound of ground pork. Half of that will go for my sausage to make my steam buns, and the other half will go for homemade spaghetti prepared in my 1976-year-old Crock-Pot rival. Yes, this was my very first Crock-Pot when I was married for the first time. I've been married twice. My very first Crock-Pot, and this puppy is still going strong. So I have a very simplified recipe, which I'll also put in the description box, for my Crock-Pot spaghetti sauce. But I do love to have it in the Crock-Pot. Let it simmer away for 4 or 5 hours. So my chorizo sausage and my perennial oregano. Oh yes, the kitchen is booming. I have so much stuff here in the kitchen. So let's get started first with the sausage. Did you know that chorizo sausage uses cinnamon? I didn't know that until I looked it up. So I just have a small, I guess it's a little bit less than a teaspoon. It's just a tiny spoon, because I only have 1/4 pound, so I don't want to use the full measurements for the full recipe. So I'm just judging. I've done this before, so I know this particular teaspoon, it's a tea, drinking tea, iced tea, like Lipton iced tea. It's one of those teaspoons, not actual measure teaspoon. Okay, you get the idea. I digress. Okay, I find that little spoon works fine for 1/4 pound of ground pork. Oh, it won't fit. It never fits. But each and every time, folks, I try. No, it doesn't shrink. Just like my waistline. Canned laughter here. Anyhow, folks, yeah, I just thought I would put together this video just to spend a little time with you. It's going to be a long video, so if you need to pause here, go right ahead. Get yourself something cool to drink, or a cup of coffee, or a cup of tea, or whatever your preference, a beer, stronger, whatever. Depending on the time of day, I suppose you're watching this, but everybody's in lockdown, so, really, time of day, if I drank, which I don't, but if I did, I don't think it would matter at this point what time of day. Anyhow, I'm sorry, I digress again. So in goes a little bit of cinnamon, and we will use vinegar as well. And you have to have the vinegar. You cannot skip the vinegar part. Now this should be made the day ahead you want to use it. You want it to sit in your refrigerator for about 24 hours. So all the spices and whatnot can mingle with your ground pork. Because let's face it, ground pork has no flavor when you buy it at the grocery store. At least mine doesn't. And there's the ground pork. I like to freeze things that I know I'm going to have for a very long time in those seal-a-meal bags. So I'm going to separate that in half and put it in my bowl. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to try my best to remember and keep my right hand clean, and only my left hand will touch the meat, so I can maneuver around and not spread anything throughout things that shouldn't be handled with meat. You have to be so careful these days, folks. It's good to pay attention. So a little bit of vinegar, I guess about a teaspoon, maybe half a teaspoon, given the small amount of meat. In the description box below, you'll have the full recipe for the full amount of meat that you can use for this particular thing. So I'm just going to take my left hand that's touched the meat and mix that all together. This is so easy, folks. The hardest part is finding the spices in your cabinet. You know what I did? I took a plastic container, small container that you would buy for storing of shoes or something like that at Walmart. And I put my spices for different things in each shoe container, and they fit perfectly inside my cupboard. So baking has its own container. Things like this, spaghetti, sausage, and whatnot, has its own container. And you have a third container in my cupboard, and it's miscellaneous things, like larger things of like the large cinnamon and the large pepper or the large garlic powder. Yeah, just a helpful tip. So just put it back in the bowl where you measured out your spices. And it's always good to measure out, because if you're doing a massive preparation, you might forget what you put in there or what you didn't. So just take a little bit of cling wrap of some sort, or anything. I don't have a bowl with a cover, so I use a little bit of cling wrap and put it over the top and put it in my refrigerator, and that'll be good for tomorrow or the next day. Or I could freeze it. It all depends. But in a couple of days, I probably will be making steamed buns. Now, I wrote down the recipe here, just showing it here quickly. Don't worry about trying to read my writing. I'll write it down in the description box below this video for you. It is so easy and simple to make these, and the dough is beautiful. I have tried a few different recipes for steamed buns, and this particular one, I need to put it fully in that book, not just a slip of paper. But yeah, my daughter gave me that book, and I like to write down recipes that I use quite often, so I don't have to drag out my heavy book when I have bad hand days. So now it's time for my simple, easy peasy Crock-Pot spaghetti sauce. So I just do about a teaspoon. That's a teaspoon measure. I use garlic powder. I use the crushed red peppers, oregano, basil. Sometimes I'll use bay leaf. I love using bay leaf. But I can't find my bay leaf. It disappeared. When I moved cabinets around, I moved my dishes from one side of the kitchen to the other side, because the side I had my dishes placed on is an outside wall. Now, folks, I live in Canada, and if you have an outside wall, let me tell you, those cupboards get cold. Yeah, the insulation in this 1970s house is not the best, so my plates would always be cold, like really cold, like straight out of the refrigerator when you go to use them, and I have to dip them in a warm bucket of water before I serve dinner on them because they were so cold. And I like my food hot. I like it piping hot. So I just switched. Finally. It only took me 19 years to do it. But no, 20 years. It only took me 20 years to smarten up and do it. So anyhow, I did. I switched. And the spices prefer the cooler anyway. So there you go. So I mix my spices together, and I have everything ready to go. Now I need to cook off my ground pork. Now I like to get my pot really hot, and I like to test it with a tiny piece of pork to see if it's hot enough. And if it is, then I like to throw it in there and get that sizzle going. Gotta have that sizzle, folks. Love that sizzle. Anyhow, so I will brown this pork a little bit, and then I'll add, I always keep a bag of frozen onions that are cut up from the grocery stores, especially now, but I did it before lockdown. I'd buy a whole bag of onions because I'd never go through them quick enough, and they would go bad, and I'd wind up throwing in my compost bin, 3 or 4 onions out of that bag. So I thought, no, 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 no. I will cut them up. I will make them small, big, in different sizes, onion rings, and different sizes, and have them in bags, freezer bags, and put them in my freezer. And when I need an onion, I just grab a handful of onion or whatever I need, and I throw it in. Now you do miss out on that fresh cut onion, so I usually try and keep one or two out when I want just a fresh cut onion. I like to have a refrigerator pickle onion and carrot sometimes. So what I'll do is I will add the onions very shortly, and then what I like to do is get a good brown, almost not a burn, but a good deep rich brown on that pan from the pork, because that's where the flavor is going to be. Because remember, pork, ground pork, it really doesn't taste like anything, really. So in goes my frozen onions into the pan. I will cook that a bit until they start to thaw out and the pork begins to brown. And if I have the pan too low, I'll rise it up and get it hot, because I want those brown bits on my pan. I don't know why I'm doing this massive cook today, but lately I've been having issues with my knees and my hands. And today when I woke up this morning, I had no issues. My knees felt fine, my hands felt fine, and I thought, okay, between lugging water around out in my garden because it's been so hot, my hands have taken a beating. So since I feel good this morning, I might as well take advantage of it. Yes, I might be sorry later on, but for now, I can get her done. Yes, I can. And there's the bag of frozen onions that I like to keep. These are the chopped up ones. As I said, if you remember, I have different ones. I have bigger chopped, like they're quartered. I have smaller chopped, and I have like onion ring type slices in my freezer. Handy dandy. Let me tell you, and you're not throwing any of your produce away that you bought from your grocery store or you've grown yourself. Yes. So it's had to crank up the heat a little bit because I had turned it down a little bit too much. Going for those brown bits, but be careful and pay attention because you don't want it to burn. If this burns, it will ruin. Yes, it will. So get everything mixed down in the pan. And I had plans because spaghetti sauce can be frozen. The refried beans can be put together and frozen in separate containers for later uses. So can the Spanish rice. I don't know if you're aware, once you've made it, it can be frozen in a lock and lock container, something that keeps the moisture out. So now I'm going to start together while I'm waiting for my pork to finish and get a nice little brown hue on it. Get my 1976 Crock-Pot going. Now I like to add a little bit of water once I've used the tomato sauce, dumped it into the Crock-Pot. I'll put a little bit of water, about 1/4 of an inch in there, and I'll swish it back and forth between the cans, and that cleans out your can. And if you keep rotating it when you're going from can to can with the water, it will actually clean out all of that tomato sauce. And you're not throwing any of that beautiful sauce down your drain when you rinse out your can. Now you do rinse out your cans, don't you folks? You don't want ants, so rinse out those cans for those recycle bins. That's what I do. I remove the labels. I don't know why I do that, but it's just a habit I do. Give your meat a little bit of a stir, giving it a check to see if it's okay. Appears to be okay, and we're getting closer. So I'm going to continue on and prepare this massive food that I'm doing today. Oh gosh. I'm also going to be making flour tortillas. But at this point in editing the video, I haven't done that yet. The other things I've completed, so I'm editing this part, and then I'll move on to the flour tortillas. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to the bottom of the pan because I like my sauce a little bit runnier. It goes further. And now I'm just going to mix back and forth. I'm going to turn the can back and forth, rotate the can, so I make sure I get the water over all of the tomato sauce bits that are left in the can. And once I'm satisfied with that mixture back and forth, waste not, want not, is what my grandma always used to say, and I've never forgotten it. I can't help myself. I can't forget that. So the can is spick and clean almost. It just needs to be washed. Yeah, I wash them out too. You got a lot of dishes. You might as well wash the cans. And plus, you won't have any bugs in your recycle bin. I don't like bugs where they need to be outside in my garden, not inside my recycle bin. So in it goes, and there are my spices that I mixed together earlier for my spaghetti sauce. Your garlic powder, your oregano, your basil. Give it a mix, some black pepper. Sometimes I'll even add a little sugar, but not this time. Check the meat. The meat's almost ready. I think I decided to crank it up, or it might be ready now. Yeah, there. I'm seeing the bits I want to see. If you see where I'm pointing, those are the bits. Those are the brown bits that I want to see. So I know I have brown bits on the bottom of the pan. And that's exactly what I want. So it's time to transfer the meat into the Crock-Pot. Trying not to lose any of those beautiful pieces of ground pork or onions. Did you know also that if you freeze an onion, because sometimes you'll buy a yellow onion and they are so strong they burn your nose and make your eyes cry even when you're eating them or cutting them. So what I do is I refrigerate my bag of store-bought onions first overnight in the refrigerator. I'll take them out and then I will peel them all and cut them all and do my different sizes when they're cold, because when they're cold they don't make you cry. Did you know that? They will not make you cry. So now I have brown bits in the bottom of my pan. I'm going to use a little bit of water. I'm going to crank up the heat and you'll see magic happen. I'm going to deglaze that pan with just a little bit of water. You can use beef broth if you want, but I didn't want to add the extra salt. So I added a little bit of water, and you'll see that water go brown. That is where the flavor lives, folks. If you want to know the secret to the famous chefs when they cook, that's what they're doing. They're deglazing that pan, and that's where all the flavor is in your meat. It would be even better with ground beef, but since I don't eat ground beef anymore, it bothers my stomach. There it is. See that beautiful, beautiful deglazed pan? Look at the brown goodness. Yes, that's flavor. So now that gets added to my pot, and I'm done. I'm done with that. I'm just going to make sure I get every little bit of the deglazed liquid from the bottom of the pan. Give it a little stir, and then put the lid on for 4 or 5 hours, and that's going to cook itself. And that part's done. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Yes, that's done. How simple can that be? Now you can add whatever you want. Sometimes I'll add bell pepper. I've been saving my bell pepper that I cut up and put in the freezer for homemade pizzas. I love the bell pepper on the pizza, so I don't put it in there. So I cover it up, have it set to high, and away it goes. Now it's time to do my refried beans. I'm going to cook the pinto beans inside of my Instant Pot. But first and foremost, you must pour out a few of your beans onto a white plate or somewhere where you can see clearly. And you're checking for rocks and stones, little pieces of dirt, because sometimes they're in there, folks. And you don't want to cook those beans with that little rock or pebble in there, because you can't tell they're in there after everything's cooked. And you bite down and someone's going to chip a tooth or break a tooth, and that's not good. So this is what I do. I scatter out, because I want about 2 cups of these pinto beans, these dried pinto beans. So I will check them for rocks, dirt, little stones, before I rinse the beans in my sink. It's funny too, folks, because every time I do this, it's like, where's Waldo? That's what it reminds me of. And usually in each bag of pinto beans, I will find 1 or 2 rocks or stones in there. So far so good. I haven't found any. So I will continue on and keep checking. And you want to do this step. You really do. You want to save your teeth and other people who are going to eat your refried beans. You don't want them biting down on that or swallowing it and choking on it, or, you know, that's not good. So just take a little time and enjoy your time in the kitchen. I do. It's not a chore. I enjoy cooking. And I enjoy eating it too, but I enjoy the preparation. I'm weird. I've got a tiny little, I call it Barbie kitchen. That's a board I have over my sink right there because, you know, I have no room. So I have a board. This is a board. When I bought my house 20 years ago, I needed a new sink. So I went out and I chose the countertop, and the plumber came in and he cut the hole for my sink into the, well, I didn't need a new sink, I needed a new countertop. So he cut the hole in the new countertop for the sink that was originally there in my house. And I said, I want to keep that because I knew I could use it. I didn't know what for, but I grabbed it right away because I paid for it. So, he wasn't going to take it with him. So, okay. Needless to say, I have a thing over my sink. So now it's time for you to rinse your pinto beans very well and get them nice and clean. So as I was saying, you need to rinse well your beans. And I like to put 2 cups of the dried beans into 8 cups of cold water inside my Instant Pot pan. Any more beans than that in my Instant Pot, I can't remember the size of it. Like it's the typical one that everybody was buying when they first came out. So whatever size, quart size that was, I don't remember. But I find that works quite well. Any more than 2 cups of beans at a time, not so well. So I'm going to put the beans into the water. Nothing added to this. You don't want anything in your beans, especially salt. So you put that in there. All the seasoning comes after your beans are cooked. And they're only going to take 30 minutes in the Instant Pot. I mean, folks, come on. Usually, when I would make my refried beans, it would take 2 hours to cook them on the stove. And you had to stir them and sometimes continue to add water and whatnot. 30 minutes and it's done. Now I'll, set it, and 35 minutes. It's already set at 35. I think I left it there. Yes, I did. Because, 5 more minutes won't hurt. And I've done that before. I've set it on, when I set it on 30 minutes and I let it rest, when it's done for the 15 minutes, then usually the pressure regulator will go down. And I smash them up with a potato masher. Well, if you leave them on for 35 minutes, they're very easy to smash with a potato masher. So this part, I am cutting up some celery for my Spanish rice. Yes, I am. I've moved on to Spanish rice now because I want to have the Spanish rice with the refried beans and the homemade flour tortillas, and you make a burrito out of it. I also have some frozen chicken fingers that are, fried, frozen, already prepared chicken fingers. You take one of your flour tortillas, you put a little bit of your refried beans on there, And there's frozen onions in that bowl that I'm adding the celery to. I don't have any fresh tomatoes, so I'm going to use a little bit of the tomato sauce that I reserved for usage in my spaghetti sauce, and that usually works well. Did you know if you don't have that, you can even use ketchup? Yes, you can. If you don't have tomatoes and you don't have tomato sauce, it's a little sweet. I mean, yeah, I'll say it. It's not authentic, yeah, the people who like authentic are probably going, no, not ketchup. But it works. If you don't have tomatoes and you don't have tomato sauce, and you want Spanish rice, you need that tomato flavor. I'm sorry, you just need ketchup. Works in a pinch. It works. So I used about a teaspoon of garlic powder, cumin. I will also use jalapeno peppers that are pickled from a jar, and a little bit of pepper. I don't necessarily add more salt because, as I said earlier when I was doing the spaghetti, there's plenty of salt in the spaghetti. In the pasta sauce or the tomato sauce from a can. There's quite a bit of sodium in there. Not as much actually as if you bought a can of, on the label it says pasta sauce or it says spaghetti sauce. Yeah, there's a lot of sodium in that. So just make your own if you want to limit your sodium intake. Just use regular tomato sauce or low sodium tomato sauce. So I just dumped what was left in there. I probably overdid it and it's going to be too spicy, but when it's all rolled in a burrito, it's okay. All the heat gets transferred to the beans and the chicken finger anyway. So I'm going to get my clean scissors, but first I'm going to check the rice. I want a brown hue to my rice, and then I'm going to add in the onions. You can also add fresh garlic, chopped up garlic mince. But I don't have that, so that's why I had to use garlic powder. Yeah. I have my daughter doing the shopping for me, and I only ask her for minimal things on the list. And, yeah. And I always forget to put fresh garlic on the list. I should ask her for that jarred garlic, because that works beautifully, and it lasts forever. Have you ever seen that in the grocery store? The garlic that's already minced up, and it comes in a jar? It works beautifully. I wish we got the bigger jars. Like I've seen in the States, some people on the cooking channels, they have these huge jars. They're like the size of mayonnaise. Oh, I'd be so happy if I had that. So anyway, I'm going to take my clean scissors, and I'm going to
just chop it out.
Just cut up the jalapeno rings that were in the jar, because I don't want I don't want to get one whole ring and one whole bite. So yeah, I want to mix it up a bit. So I'm just going to stir around the rice that's brown with the onions and the celery, and then add the, I want about 2 cups of, usually, okay folks, for each 1 cup of rice, you will use 1.5 cups of water. But with Spanish rice, it's a little different. I'm using parboiled rice in this, not the sticky kind, not the regular long grain rice. So I typically will use 2 cups of water when I make Spanish rice, because I'm adding the spices, in their powdered form. I'm adding vegetables, and I find that if I add exactly 2 cups of fluid, and that's counting the tomato sauce, so I'll put the tomato sauce in my measuring cup and bring it up to 2 cups with just water. Or you can use chicken broth if you don't mind. It will taste better with chicken broth. But then again, I want to try and limit the sodium content in my cooking. So I just add the spices that I already prepared in the bowl. Quick and easy. You already know. It's ready. Things like this go very quickly if you're prepared in the kitchen. You might think, oh, I don't want to do those dishes, but it's so much easier when you're preparing, especially when you're doing like a massive preparation in your kitchen like I'm doing today. It's much easier to have everything in little bowls. One little bowl, you don't need a dozen little bowls. Clean as you go, because I noticed it splattered on the wall there, so I like to clean as I go. And not have a big old mess, because I know I'm going to have a lot of dishes when I'm done, especially with massive cooking. And I've got a tiny kitchen, remember. I only have enough room for so many dirty dishes to stack up. You'll see the stack. You'll see the hot mess, as the young folks say. And it's a hot mess of dirty dishes. You'll see. So, I love that wooden spoon. I found that just before lockdown. I think it was in April I found it. There's the hot mess. And it's building, and I'm not done yet. But that's what it is so far. I like to have one bowl and just start putting things into the bowl. Now for the rice. The secret to Spanish rice. You want a lid that's tight-fitting with no holes in the lid. If your lid has a hole and it's simmering for 20 to 25 minutes, too much of the water will evaporate and your rice won't cook. Have you ever made Spanish rice with a lid that had a hole, and the 20 or 25 minutes in your rice, a lot of your rice is still hard and crunchy and never cooked, but all the water's gone, and you keep adding water and you keep adding time, and you wind up with a big pot of mush? Well, that's why. Pick a lid that doesn't have a hole. Now, if you don't have a lid that doesn't have a hole, take a piece of aluminum foil and just stick it in there. Yeah, plug that hole. Stick a little bit of aluminum foil in that hole so the air doesn't escape. And so you let your rice come to a simmer, a nice simmer, almost a boil, but not a hard boil. And then you cover it and you lower it immediately. And I put it between minimum and 2 on my stove. I don't know what that would be on other people's things, but I just thought I'd show you. And I set my timer for 25 minutes. Usually it's done in 20, but I like to go 25. I will check it at 20 minutes because sometimes there's still fluid in there, liquid, because I have a lid with no hole, right? Okay, so my beans are going, my spaghetti sauce is going, and look at that, my Spanish rice is finished. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Now, it's time to do dishes. Yes, and there's some dishes washed. Now let me tell you about this. Who cans? Anybody cans or pickles anything? You know those plastic things you put over your jars so you can pour your pickles or whatever you're canning into the jars? I had this giant square one, and it works beautifully, hanging off of my rack for my sponges and my little other things that I use. And there's my mixer where I'm going to prepare my flour tortillas. And because we're going to be 93 Fahrenheit today, I have shade cloth over certain things. I have it over my tomatoes and my peppers and my beans, and I have it over my cool crops such as my kohlrabi, Swiss chard, my Swede, rutabaga. And in the fridge, let me tell you about my strawberries. Remember the last video? If you watched my last one, I ate a strawberry. I went out there, I had 3 more ready. One of them was half eaten, and these 2 were fine. Now a critter couldn't get in there, but guess what? Wasps and hornets can. I have potato salad there. I have fried rice that I've made before, and I like to keep these containers. There's my sausage, my Chorizo Sausage for my steamed buns. And let me tell you about my pineapple. I was in a pineapple back in 2000, and I believe it was 16. I needed the soil from said pineapple, so I took it out and put it in a jar. And I couldn't throw it out. And this is back in March. So I put it in a jar of water, I trimmed the roots, and it's still living. I pulled it out of the soil, folks, and put it in a jar of water, and it's still living. Okay, celery. I don't know why. I just stuck the end of the celery into a little dish and watching it grow. Hi folks, I'm back. So the beans are ready to turn into refried beans. Then all I do is I smush them with my potato masher. I add some ground cumin, celery, onions, anything really you want to add to it. I put shredded cheese on top and I let it warm through, and then I put it in a container, and then when I go to serve it I use more. And the Spanish rice, 2 containers full, all ready for the refrigerator to make burritos. Thank you so much for joining me. Everybody knows what spaghetti sauce looks like. Have a great day.